So, what do you think is important for people to know?
Oh gosh. One of my biggest things is intuition. For several years, my biggest message was trust your gut. Like, if you have a gut feeling about something, there is a reason why. And that book that the detective recommended, the book, The Gift of Fear.
Yeah, I
I
was going to
recommend.
ask you, did you actually read the book?
Yeah, I've read it 3 times. I
Oh, three
can
times.
like
Okay.
because I read a book and then there's so much content in a book that like I certainly don't let everything sink in. But the book is it speaks so much to where intuition comes from, what it is and how it shows up for people. And it opens with a really scary story that can be triggering for people. But this man offers to carry in this woman's groceries, and immediately she's like, that doesn't feel right. But then he says something, well, what are you worried that I'm going to hurt you or something like that? And so it goes into the psychology of what can happen, like what is happening in that situation and what went wrong. And it's crazy, but it's so good. I think every woman should read it. I think every guy should read it too, because I think especially as women, we are so used to taking care of the needs of others and sometimes putting ourselves second. Like, I would think of myself like going into an elevator. If I look at who's in the elevator and I feel like uncomfortable, I might still push myself to go into the elevator because, oh, I'll feel bad. Like clearly they knew I was trying to get on the elevator and I'm not getting in. And so I might force myself to do it. And like even the book, I think, talks about it. It's like, why are you getting in a closed, confined box with somebody who makes you feel uncomfortable? Like that's
Yeah.
literally wild, but we do that to ourselves. And
Yeah.
so
You're
it
worried
was,
about what they'll think of you if you don't get in.
yeah, yeah. Or like if you're walking down the side of the street, like what's the vibe of somebody that you're like, if you don't feel uncomfortable, cross the street, and somebody I follow, Tony Blauer, he's incredible man in like studying self-defense and fear and the psychology of it as well. And what was I going to say with him, but he's just like, why would you not cross the street like this? It's so like, there's it doesn't hurt anybody, but again, it just my point in all of that was really starting to be aware of what your gut's telling you in situations. And if it's showing up, it's showing up for a reason. And one thing to know about intuition that I've learned, and I'm certainly not an intuition expert, but as I mentioned before, intuition is very neutral. It doesn't come from a place of like excitement or anxiety. It's very just like neutral. So a difference could be like, and I've struggled with a lot of anxiety clearly, but like sometimes if I go to bed, even to this day, I like, oh my gosh, what if somebody's coming in? Like I can think that might be my gut telling me, oh, somebody's coming in and I'm scared. That's not your intuition. That's anxiety because it's coming from a place of like you're anxious, you
Right.
have fear, versus intuition is more like you might want to go double check those doors. Like just very like neutral, if that makes sense. So I think that's one of my biggest things. And forever too with intuition, I only understood it through a lens of safety and fear. And I talked to what I think is really cool about this too is teaching it to our kids. And you don't have to have like our kids still don't know about what happened, but it's allowed me to open up conversations more so with my daughter because she's a little bit older. But I've talked about like, hey, if you're ever walking on the street or you're at school or whatever, like, what would happen? Like if a stranger talked to you, like, what does that feel like? And then, well, that wouldn't feel good. I'm like, that's your gut telling you that that person isn't right. And then we have that discussion, like, what do you do in that situation? And so you have to be really careful because I don't want to instill in her fear, but it's just like
Right.
creating opportunities about intuition. And I even talked about it as an example in the classroom, like, oh, your teacher wants you to pick a friend to read a book with. Who do you want to read a book with? And then it's like, well, I really want to read it with this person, but then I feel bad. I'm like, well, your gut's telling you it was that person. And so just like highlighting what that's like. But intuition is more than just safety. It's also like in everyday life, like with my insurance agency, there's been people I've interviewed and I'm like, oh, I don't know. But then because my head gets in the way, like, oh, they have experience. Oh, they have a license. Oh, they're older than me. And then I start justifying why it should be the right decision. And then I move forward. Oh, did you think those worked out for me? No, it didn't. Like my gut was, and I'm like, gosh darn it. Like my gut told me. I knew. So you start to have enough of those moments where you, and intuition, it's like, it takes a lot of practice. And as I've learned it to be, it's kind of a muscle that you develop over time. And I think it's a really important muscle because it allows us to get in tune with what's really right for us and not let our head get in our way, which we do so much.
Yeah. Do you ever think you at first you're like suspicious of everyone?
Oh, yeah, I totally. I mean, they
Like,
teach
it's my intuition with everyone, every
oh yeah,
single
I
person.
think, yeah, for sure. You're totally jacked up, like absolutely. So it takes like time and yeah, just repetitions of having, experiences with people that are okay. But I know we're not supposed to judge others. And I think it's something I do pretty well, accepting others, but let's be real. We also all judge other people. Like we're always doing it. And I mean, that's probably a primal behavior too, I would think. So, but yes, I mean, every person I come into contact, I'm assessing them. And,
Yeah.
and it's not like it's a big deal. It's just like in a millisecond, how do I feel? Do I feel okay? And, yeah.
Yeah. So, are you able to be home alone now?
I am. Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of it is we have now 2 German Shepherds. So
protection dogs. Okay.
yeah, well, we thought we'd have to put down one. And I was like, I can't sleep without a like a dog that would go for somebody. And so I think we definitely have layers of like comfort in our home. But yes, I'm able to be home, but it is kind of with we've got our fence, our gate, a dog. I lock my doors all the time. But yes, I can.
I was going to say, are there any other tips besides doing that you would have for others?
Yeah,
You still do the bat and wasp spray?
We still do the bat. We now have a metal bat. And
okay.
Yep. We don't have wasp spray. We do have guns, which I hate that our like story always turns into a gun debate because frankly, I don't even love that we have guns.
Did you have to go to training to know how to use them?
You have to get you have to get your concealed weapons permit, which honestly, I think that's just a test, but we're fortunate to have like people in law enforcement and even friends who are very good with guns that have taken us out and helped. But that's the thing is like, you need to keep using it. And we're not really people that just go like shoot guns
at the gun range.
Yeah. So that's where it's tough is because like, if you have to respect that, if you're going to carry, then you need to keep up on it. And yeah, it's, but yes,
was that traumatic having to go do that and having to shoot a gun?
No, that wasn't traumatic. That was, but it's uncomfortable. Like, it's just not like, I don't enjoy doing it. So, and I'm kind of annoyed. I don't know. It crops up other emotions. It's like, I'm just annoyed that that's something it feels like we need to have. And again, it crops up the conversation of like the gun debate, which is just so annoying to me. I think that's such a personal thing and it's different for everybody. And like when a lot of people would make the comment like, oh, they should have just had a gun. Honestly, like our situation worked out exactly how it needed to. Like if we had a gun, I don't know if I would have been able to just go shoot him. Like I had to, again, go through all of those things that failed and didn't work to get to the point where it did. And so I hate that comes into the conversation, because it's honestly like, it's just dumb. Not dumb, I shouldn't say that, but it's just not where, like that's not the focus of our story, is a gun debate.
So well, I don't want to say this word because gun, but I was going to say, does anything trigger you now?
Well, that doesn't trigger me, but, yeah, I mean, if I'm caught off guard, I like, what I've learned about trauma is like, it's literally in your cells. And so that's something over the last decade that I've really tried to, I mean, I've done so many different modalities of trying to get to work on my trauma as much as I can. And, now I have like Jeff, my therapist, who I'm so incredibly grateful for, because I think we've been working together. Oh my gosh, I think it's almost been 4 years, maybe 3 or 4 years. And where was I going with this? Oh, I thought I was doing pretty good up until and I didn't even like look for him. This was something I was connected to him by Tony Blauer, because Tony had me on his podcast. He's the self-defense guy, and he was picking up like, okay, Tenny still has some issues. And so he asked if he could connect me to Jeff, and that was his intuition saying that we needed to connect. And then from there, I mean, I've just never had a therapist in my life like Jeff is for me.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, I feel so lucky. But when I'm caught off guard, it is somewhat triggering, because I do think it just triggers that like fight mode or whatever that is, your nervous system. Like catching off guard is really hard. I've smell. He had such a unique, disgusting smell. I've literally never smelled anything like that before. I felt like it took years before I could forget what he smelled like. And years ago, I actually met somebody, who smelled exactly like him, and I freaked out. So I think smell is a trigger. I mean, the guy had like jean shorts and white sneakers, and he just had this look about him. And so when I see like, the 80s, 90s sneakers that men wore with I always think about it. Yeah, I mean, noises, like if I'm by myself and I hear a noise, I'll start like thinking about that. And then I have to like do a lot of inner work to get myself out of that loop. So.
Wow. Well, you've done a lot of work on yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. It's, again, I just so wanted to feel normal again, and, not be stuck in a place of having this like paralyze me the rest of my life. Like that would be, that's not a life that you want to live. So
yeah, it's just amazing that you have gone through this, and you're so bright, cheery, positive, full of energy. No one would ever know. I mean, you've done a lot of work. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's definitely a lot of I do appreciate that, because it's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, that it's those moments in the middle of the night when I have a nightmare. Jeff and I work on okay, what happens when a nightmare comes? And, I implement techniques he talks to me about, and I do those techniques instead of just for a lot of years, get on my phone, try to distract myself. So it's a lot of those quiet moments in the middle of the day or the middle of the night where it shows up that you work on it. And yeah, it is a lot of work. At least it was for me. Kyle, I think, did have, we experienced the same situation, but Kyle, we had differences too. And I think Kyle was able to, of course he had trauma, but I think he was able to get to a better place than I was. Kyle never had to go on medication like I did. Yeah. So I think we all it's different for everybody, and accepting that is really important, but also accepting if you need more help, then getting it too. So
yeah. And he seems to be okay.
yeah, he does. He's tough because it's not like he's super open with, babe, I'm really struggling with this. And I think there's like, part of it is just like, that's just how he is. He doesn't usually like bring up feelings that much, but also I think there's probably a layer of like, maybe I feel this, but I don't want to share that with Tenny because, that might impact her.
Yeah.
We both will, like, traveling alone is really hard for us because I don't think we'd ever like rent a house by ourselves anymore with our family. Like, we need to do it with friends. We always have to sleep with a fan. Like, if we don't have like white noise, it's almost impossible to sleep. But even it was interesting because even when I went on my trip to Sedona, that was my first time like really being gone.
Oh yeah. I want to ask you about your trip, but first,
yeah,
you're writing a book.
I am. Thank you.
Tell me about that.
Heard it here first.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, following the intuition piece, there was a show, Your Worst Nightmare, who did an episode on us years and years ago, and we're not big public people and we're pretty private and don't like the spotlight, but it sounds so cliche and cheesy, but it was like, I mean, if our story does help somebody, like, at least that makes going through what we went through a little bit more palatable because it can help somebody.
Yeah.
And so when that show aired, we got a lot of messages come in to both of us, and then they re-air our episode. They probably re-air it every month, but like they re-air it and people find it. And so over the last several years, I'll get messages from people like, your story's so inspiring. Like, I'm so glad you're so protected. And I'll get them from people all over the world. So as I, over the last 3 years, started to get those messages, I was like, oh, like, our story, like, our story is impacting people. Like, that's pretty cool. And so that was starting to be interesting. And then I had like the intuitive, like, my gut tell me like, Tenny, you're going to write a book. But I was like, oh my gosh, who am I to write a book? I'm nobody. Like, what? Like, and I totally pushed it to the side because I was like, no, you're nobody. And then a couple of years later, at one point I got the like nudge to like do a podcast, and I was like, no, who are you to do a podcast? Like,
oh,
and you don't know what to do with a podcast. Like, but then I'm getting to the place where I'm really starting to trust my intuition more, and that it is something, because it did excite me, but I just had all these stories I'd tell myself. So I actually met a friend, Stacy, who I connected you guys to, and Stacy is very intuitive and so supportive and everything. And I actually told her about the podcast, and she's like, no, you need to totally do that. And so with doing the podcast, that was my first step into stepping into like, no, you can't, like, your story is meant to share, and you want to genuinely help people. And it's not about focusing on the event itself. It's about focusing on everything after, because that's the stuff that, like, the media focuses on the crime itself, but like, that was just 3 minutes of our life, if you will. Like, it completely flipped our world upside down. So my heart is to help share with other people, like, what it was like to experience trauma, and then how do you heal from it. And it's not pretty, it's not easy, it takes a while, but like, there's so much, and it doesn't have to look like your experience either. Like, trauma shows up in so many different things. It could be acne as a kid and not feeling comfortable in your own skin, right? And that can have an impact on you and your life. And so I just really started to feel in my heart, like, how much I genuinely want to help other people, and whatever it is. I'm no expert. I've just been through the experience, and all I have is to share what I've tried and what has worked and what hasn't worked. And so I did the podcast, and then that was great. But
so
like,
you had your own podcast, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's called Common Ground, with Tennyson Jacobson, but there's only 7 episodes right now. Like, it's literally been untouched for 2 years, because the point was to share our story in our own words, but then to start exploring other topics. And I started to have some people reach out to me that made me really uncomfortable. So then it did trigger me, and I paused, and I have now just been like, what am I doing with it? But then to get to your point, the book, I felt that come up in my gut, and it made me really excited. And I'm now at a point where I'm like, if something feels exciting and I'm really curious about and I can make it happen, and honestly, I'm just really excited about it, I want to see if I can make it happen and explore it, because I think if that desire is on your heart, there is a purpose for it. And it led me to being connected with somebody, and now we're working on a book, and she's also a publisher, and she's just amazing. And so the goal is to share our story, but also just everything else, because there's so
talk
much
about the learning experience that you had, and also about personal growth.
Yeah. And a part of it too is like, this wasn't my first trauma in my life. Like there's other stuff before that shaped me and were struggles before this happened. And so it's to discuss some of those things too. But ultimately, it's still forming. It's still such in this beginning stage, but the genuine hope is just to help others. And
When might it be out?
Oh, next year.
Next year?
Probably. Yeah. Probably
late next year?
Late to end of next year.
Okay. Well, when it comes out, will you come on again?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay, great. So I wanted to ask you, I know that you just took a trip.
Yep.
And you went by yourself.
Did.
And was this your first time taking a trip by yourself?
Yes.
How did this come about, and how do you do that? Tell us.
Yeah. So going in lines with trying to follow my intuition, I also last year, 2021, I decided it was my year of curiosity. And so much of my life, I've been curious about stuff, but I didn't look into it or explore it because I was like, oh my gosh, are people going to think I'm weird that I'm doing that? Or am I weird that I'm doing that? Or that's too much money. And I really just tried to put all of that crap away. And it was like, Tenny, if you're curious about something, like, explore it. And so I did that. I've made that commitment. I'm still doing that commitment to myself. But this year, in trying to work on where am I going with this book and podcasts and trying to figure it all out, I was listening to a woman, and she talked about going to Sedona for a retreat. And I immediately was like super curious about it. And so I was like, okay, check it out. And so I actually forced myself to stay home from work one day because my gut was like, Tenny, you need to stay home from work. And that's really hard for me because I'm a high achiever, and I don't want to let people down. But I was like, you have worked super hard to run the business how you have, like, you can stay home for a day. And so I stayed home, and I listened to, or I just started checking out this retreat. It's called Sedona Soul Adventure. And I was just so intrigued by it. And it's, you go to Sedona and you basically share with the people who run the retreat, where are you at in life? What are you looking for? Like, what's going on that made you interested to come here? And so, so I talked to them about that, and I felt so excited about it, so curious about it. And so, I was like, oh my gosh, am I doing this?
So what did your husband say? I want to go on this retreat by myself.
Well, he was supportive. He was totally supportive. I mean, there's having to figure out kids and his work schedule, but it wasn't the first time I talked about doing a retreat. I've actually looked into a retreat before that is really cool. And he had been like, hey, if that's something you feel called and needed to do, like, I support that. So, like, at least we had that foundational conversation before. And that retreat I kind of went inside and I was like, Tenny, does this feel right for you? And my gut was like, no, Tenny, it feels like whatever you get at that retreat, you already have the tools for. And so it didn't feel right. And so with this one, what?
Yeah, go ahead.
So with this one, when I kind of, again, went inside, like, seriously, this is a lot of money. You're taking a big break away from your family, your job. Like, is this really right? And what kept coming up is like, yeah, you need to do it. You need to do it. And so thankfully in sharing with Kyle, he was supportive about it. And then I was like, and then even talking to you was great when you were in my office, and um, you were really helpful, Kim, because you're like, you need, like, do it. You're so encouraging when I was like getting in my head about it. Yeah. And so it was my first trip alone, which I honestly did not give as much thought to like the idea of being alone, because I was just so excited about the trip. And Sedona is like, I mean, that's the mecca of like healers and woo woo and like peace and beauty. And like it's an older community, and so like of all places to travel to, like it feels really like feels safe, you know? And so I
Yes.
just didn't think about it.
And you
But
just went, right? You just got back like 2 days ago?
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but I did land, and I landed in Phoenix, and I got in my rental car, and it hit me, and I was like, I'm alone. Like
Oh,
I don't know anybody here. Like I'm pretty independent. I can, but I was like, oh my gosh. And I started holding back tears because I was like, you're all alone. And it freaked me out because I've just never I've never been in that position before. I mean, been in that place before, if you will. And it's a 2-hour drive to Sedona, like in the middle of the desert. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if I get a flat tire? Like, what do I do? Like, there's not like a tire shop like a mile away. And so
wow. What an experience.
yeah. And I think that's one of actually my biggest takeaways from the trip was um it was really bringing in my own power. Like again, I'm pretty independent. I'm a high achiever. I like to figure things out, and I do for the most part, but I do doubt myself a lot. And going on this trip was such a great experience to like just show myself I got this, and not just traveling, like even going to a restaurant by myself. Like I've done it before here, but at places I'm familiar with. And so doing it in a completely new place, I was like, I'm gonna go to the restaurant, sit by myself. Like, what do I do? And so I like the first night I did it just at my hotel, and I just like I sat on my phone the whole time because it was so awkward because I didn't even know what to do. Or I think I journaled, and then I got on my phone, and then I pretended to look at the menu for like 20 minutes, even though I didn't need to look at it. So it was so awkward.
You order
But
anything?
what was that?
Did you order anything?
Well, a glass of wine, and then I think that was it. But then and even to get myself to go out that night, I was in my hotel room and like there was live music playing, and I love live music. And so
yeah.
I was in my hotel room like, do you go by yourself? Like, this is my self-talk. It's like, am I going by myself? No, like I should just stay in my room. Like the room is nice. It's great. I can have a glass of wine here. And then my head was like, but you love live music. Like, it's okay. Like a lot of people are by themselves. No, am I really it was like this circus in my head to get myself to go be
lots of self-talk going on in your
But
head.
I think a lot of people, I don't know, a lot of people aren't like me, but I think a lot of people do that too. Cause I even met women there who were like, man, I wouldn't have come by myself. I totally would have stayed in my hotel room. And so it was cool, like just doing those things. And
so did you go listen to music?
I did. Oh yeah, I did.
Did.
Yes, I did.
Good for you.
The second night I did it again, and I just started journaling at the restaurant because there's live music again. I happened to meet 2 women who are life coaches, and that sparked a beautiful conversation. And I think there are people that I'll be connected with. And then the next night I was like, okay, Tenny, you've been to your hotel 2 nights in a row, but like that feels safe now. Like that feels comfortable. Like you want to try other restaurants because I like food. And so I was like, and I was like, okay, there's a restaurant I want to go to. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to a restaurant by myself. And it was, but I was like, no, like I felt pulled to go to the restaurant. I've got this. I'll sit in the bar. And I go to the restaurant. It's so busy. And I look at the bar, like there's no spots. And then the hostess sees me and she's like, can I help you? And I was like, oh, I just wanted one spot at the bar. And she's like, oh, I'll look for you. And then she found one at like the very end of the bar. I was like, perfect. I'll be in the corner. And I like walk around. And as I'm walking to my seat, the owner of Sedona Soul Adventures was sitting right there with her husband, like literally right next to me. And so I was like, oh my gosh, are you Deborah? And she's like, yeah. I was like, oh, I'm on a retreat. And she's like, oh my gosh, no way. And then she's like, what's your name? And I said, Tennyson. And she's like, you're Tennyson? And she had just seen somebody who I had seen that morning. And it's just so funny how things work out, and how, when I pushed myself to do something, it turned out really, really nice. So yeah, that was one of the biggest lessons I took away, was just like, the confidence to do stuff like that, and strength.
You're like, I can do this.
Yeah.
Each one of the things, I can do this.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, that might sound cheesy for people, but that stuff is harder for me. And so, strengthening my confidence in myself to just like go out and be, and,
you're so brave.
It's really important.
So when you said that you were journaling, you were actually in the bars journaling, like writing with a pen, or on an app, or you were?
No, I like writing with a pen. The more I can get off electronics is nice, even though it's definitely more efficient. But because each day I would have 2 sessions a day, and they're usually about 3 hours. And so I really wanted to journal about each experience with each session, and just add notes so I can look back at it or potentially include it in the book. And so, and I've always been somebody who needs like something going on around them versus like total quiet. Otherwise I can't focus. So, so I would, and I mean, people, again, it's Sedona, so it's totally like normal probably for somebody to just journal at a bar. But
yeah, that's incredible that you did that.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah.
So when you talk about the sessions you were in, tell me about what were they? What kind of sessions?
Yeah, this is where I need to like figure out how to explain them, because I know it's a little hard to understand. But basically, again, they listen to what are your goals, what are your needs, and then they have a group of like 50 to 60 practitioners that they create this itinerary for you. And so,
and do you go to these sessions by yourself, or is it a group?
Yeah, great question. So the retreat is completely individual. So they have like one little office room where you check in, you get your stuff, but then they really believe in an individual experience. And so you have your own lodging, you're completely individual, but they do couples retreat. So unless you're with your spouse, but yeah. And then the practitioners are all at their own house. So they operate in their own rooms and whatnot. So I got my like itinerary, and it's like, okay, go to Joanna's house at 10 o'clock. Here are the directions. And my sessions were like revolved around letting go of like beliefs, about myself, and starting to like clear trauma. And again, not just trauma from our experience, but other just stuff that has come up through life experience. And so I had a few, like my first session was, this woman does work with highly sensitive people. And so I did a test on being a highly sensitive
I'm an HSP. Person. Did you know I'm an HSP? Did I tell you that?
I didn't. But do you know it's only 20% of the population too? I was kind of surprised at that. Yeah.
So you are one? You're an HSP?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, good. Yeah. We have that in common too.
I'm not surprised. But yeah, then we had like a really cool discussion around highly sensitive people, just to learn more about that, and just having the reinforcement of like what it means to be an HSP. Like we do experience things differently, light, sound,
yes,
whatever it is. And so even just having those conversations and like reinforcing like who you are as an individual is really empowering, because we get so caught up in comparing ourselves and, oh, well, they can just do that. Why can't I just, well, we're fundamentally different.
Wow.
So we did that. And then we did a little bit of trauma work where, I just, like we did visualizations, which is a technique I do with my therapist a lot. So that part felt, similar to what I do with him. And some of that's, working with your inner child. That
That's hard
evening,
for me. That's hard for me to do.
oh, it's so powerful.
Visualizing.
Oh, visualizing.
They tell me to do that when I went to therapy before, visualize this and that. I'm like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
try so hard, and then I just start making up stuff because I can't,
Oh,
it's really hard for me to do it. It's almost impossible. I mean, I
and
try
I
and try and try.
actually, you're not alone. Like that is a lot of people. So if visualizing isn't your thing, then it's something, it could be journaling. It could be
Yeah.
just embodying the feeling of whatever it is versus like seeing a picture in your mind. But you're certainly not the only one. And
Yeah.
so don't force it if it's not your thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, later that day, I did something called sand play where this woman has like trinkets and treasures like on all four walls of the room. And you grab, she's like, okay. And then there's this tray in the middle that's sand, and you just go grab items from the shelves. And she's like, do not overthink. Literally, your job is just whatever sparks your interest, you grab it. And so her phrase is
How
like,
fun.
when in doubt, grab it. It was fun. And I'm like walking around this room, grabbing these things, and I'm just like giggling as I pick them up because I'm like, why am I drawn to this pink laughing Buddha? Why am I drawn to this monkey that's eyes are popping out of its face? Why am I picked up Gumby. I picked up, I don't know, just random stuff. And so, when we started looking at the tray, a lot of times the conversations with that go really deep. And she was like, it's actually so obvious to me, like what your tray represents. And she's like, when you look at your tray, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I mean, it's so funny to me. Like, it just looks fun.
Yeah.
And she was like, I think that's it. And she's like, I think your message is like super simple. Like, how much fun do you have? And I think, me, I'm pretty silly and goofy and quirky. But it was something I've never given thought to, that I really do struggle with like just going and having fun. And I'm a big person in like color in the lines. Like I'm a perfectionist. And she's like, how often do you just like go with your kids and splatter paint everywhere, or just like be spontaneous and just like go roll around on the grass, or just like be silly? And I realized like that's part of me that like probably was a little bit cut off with our trauma, but also like as a kid growing up, and my mom's amazing, but we really focused on reading and learning and flashcards and music. And so there wasn't a ton of just like, at least from what I remember, just like, being playful and all of that sort of stuff. So that was actually a really profound session for me to just like buy those pink earrings, or I like gray, white, and black. Those are my colors. I love them. And so she was like, get that pink blazer, or,
Totally.
shoes or whatever. I know you're like queen of color. And so
Oh,
I'm like,
really?
you know what? I love it though. But it's true. A lot of times I like see something, I'm like, oh, that's so fun. And I'm like, but I like my vibe. I'm neutral. And so now I'm going to be like, how do you feel when I like find that pink pair of shoes? Like they feel fun. Like that's, like it does create a different energy within. So something like that. And then I did this hand analysis session, which was fascinating, which it's not like going to the palm reader and reading your palm. It's actually a trained skill. It's not intuitive. And this lady, I feel like she could cut you with her eyes. Like she was so intense. It's like some of these people are not warm and fluffy people. They're very like skilled, impressive women. And she, like, her thing is like your fingerprints, like those never change in your life, but your palm, like those lines on your hand share experiences. And I just sat there, and she just wrote down things, and she was like, wow, you have a lot more lines than most people at your age. And then she went into a whole explanation of my hand, and she was like, does that seem right? I'm like, yeah. So that was really interesting. And I did another, like, just an energy clearing, healing session. I had a massage, another session that was kind of like inner child work. There was one where we went out into the vortexes in Sedona. So you go out, it's just gorgeous, the red rocks. And it was a very traditional, like, ceremony, like Native American style ceremony, which, whether that's your thing or not your thing, it was beautiful culturally, like, just to experience, like, slowly being through nature and with somebody who does that all the time, and just noticing small things. And I wrote down things that I want to let go of, and we burned it. And yeah, it just,
what an experience.
It was really cool. It was really, really it was really empowering. So
did you get extra energy being over there? Did you feel
I don't know
about?
I just feel more at peace, and I feel like, you and I have talked about boundaries before. I feel more like solid in the ability to stand my own ground versus like people pleasing. Cause I had 5 days of just like truly taking care of myself. And that really did, like, along with people who helped support that, in the energy of Sedona, which is different. And so that in itself is very, just, I feel more empowered, and to stand, like, what feels right for me, where do I want to go, and all that sort of stuff. So
I love it. So you carry that with you now.
Where
you live now, right?
Yeah. And it'll be continual work. Like, life continues to happen and throw curveballs and whatnot. But I know what this feeling feels like now. And so I can definitely, and a lot of, for me, and I'll have to hop off here soon because I have my follow-up call, but what was I going to say? Oh, I overthink things so much. Like, I realize I have this struggle. Oh, I'm challenged with this. Like, and so I'm like, what meditation can I do to figure that out? Or who do I need to talk to? Or do I need to hire a coach for this? And a lot of this retreat was just like, Tenny, chill out. Like, just be, and stop, like, trying to force things to happen, and just, like, be present, and, like, trusting, and stop trying to, like, just overthink things. So, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. This has been fabulous. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. What a story. And when your book comes out, come back on the show and we'll talk about it again.
Okay. Can't wait. It'll be great.
I know you have to get to a phone call, and we're going shopping now. So, it's Black Friday. So
I know. It's so crazy. Well, thank you for being so awesome. I appreciate you so much. You are just, like, so special, and I'm so glad we're connected. So thank you so much for everything. Yeah.
Thank you, and have a great day.
Okay. You too.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.